Good night, horror stories. I want to share an experience anonymously. It happened to my wife and I when we were returning from a short vacation in Texas, visiting my mother-in-law. It is a story as strange as it is terrifying, which we have avoided telling for fear of being judged. However, only she and I know that it was real and inexplicable. It was in 2019, shortly before the pandemic. It happened on Highway 14 returning to Austin. Around 10 at night, we stopped at a store to buy something sweet that we were craving. As we left there and advanced a few kilometers, we saw someone in the distance, in the middle of the road, waving their hands desperately, which is why we managed to see him despite the distance. But my wife, without thinking much, told me, "Don't brake, it's dangerous." He is usually quite afraid, so I assured him not to worry, that I would continue driving without stopping. Although if he'd been alone, maybe he would have. However, as we got closer, we were perplexed to see that it was a girl, about 11 years old, crying and screaming for help with her small hands. My wife quickly changed her mind and told me to stop, thinking that perhaps the girl had had an accident with her family or was lost. I stopped next to her and rolled down the window on my wife's side, who asked her if she was lost or what had happened for her to be alone in that place at that hour. The girl, desperate and crying, begged us to let her get into the car, saying, "It's close, please let me in, it's coming." My wife was trying to calm her down when I asked her who she was referring to and who would come get her. The girl, trembling with fear, responded with a broken voice, "My aunt is coming to look for me and will take me with her. She is very bad, and I am very afraid of her." I had barely finished speaking when I saw something in the distance and said to my wife with my heart racing, "My God, here it comes." My wife and I looked in the direction the girl was pointing and saw a dark figure slowly approaching from the mountain, barely illuminated by the car's headlights. The atmosphere became oppressive and a feeling of panic enveloped us. The girl, seeing her approach, constantly turned around and struggled with the lock, trying to open the door. My wife unlatched the locks and we finally opened the car door, allowing her to quickly climb into the back seat. While my wife tried to calm her down, I accelerated quickly and we drove away as quickly as possible. The little I could see was a very disturbing-looking old woman. I understood perfectly why the girl was afraid of him. When I saw her, my whole body shook. Her face reflected an indescribable evil. She was very pale, and her hair, extremely long and gray for her advanced age, gave her a gloomy appearance. Looking in the rearview mirror, I saw the woman on the side of the road, watching us in a very menacing manner, barely moving. His figure slowly faded into the distance as we sped up. As we walked away, the girl calmed down little by little, although she continued to shake nonstop. While my wife asked him where his family was and what his name was, the girl, crying at intervals, was still visibly frightened and with a trembling voice tried to answer. She told us her name was Emily and that her parents weren't there. He only lived with his aunt, but she wasn't good. Her father had abandoned them when she was born and her mother had died a few years ago because she was sick. Since then, he has had to stay with her. Trying to get more information, I asked, "Where does your aunt live, Emily? How did you come to be alone on the road?" Between crying and crying, he told us that he had escaped. The temperature in the car seemed to drop several degrees as we listened to Emily's disturbing story. Every word he said made my skin crawl even more. During the trip, we decided to take her to the nearest police station to make sure she was safe and to find out more about her family. We couldn't have a minor without informing the authorities, but Emily begged us not to go to the police. She was afraid that she would be arrested, claiming that she had done something very bad and that she would be locked up. We were stunned. My wife asked Emily what she had done so badly, and the girl replied that she had poisoned her aunt with rodenticide by mixing it with her food. My wife and I exchanged worried glances. We didn't know how to react to what we had just heard. On the one hand, we had a responsibility to protect Emily and make sure she was safe. But on the other hand, her words left us wondering if we were being complicit in something much more serious. "Why did you do that, Emily?" my wife asked with a trembling voice, trying to understand what had led the girl to make such a drastic decision. She was evil. "During the nights at home, I did horrible things," he whispered, barely audible over the noise of the engine. He performed strange rituals with red candles throughout the house, used dead animals, and then burned everything. I was very afraid. I locked myself in my room and hid under the bed, but he came to look for me and made me stay up all night to witness everything he did by tying my hands to the table. She is a witch, and that is why I poisoned her, taking her life. She cried nonstop, fearing being imprisoned, while we tried to understand everything we heard. We wondered who we had seen chasing the girl then. I asked the girl who that woman was, and she replied that it was her aunt, but she was dead. We told her that that was not possible, that if she was dead, her soul should be resting and she couldn't be chasing her like that. We raised the possibility that perhaps her aunt wasn't really dead, and that she had thought that she was, that for some reason she was there tormenting her. The girl insisted that her aunt was dead, but that she had a pact with the devil, who had sent her to harm her and take revenge for what she had done. It was hard for us to believe that a girl who was barely 11 years old would say something like that to us. Although we knew something strange was going on, we had a hard time believing her story about her grandmother haunting her after death, and the supposed diabolical pact to cause her harm. We thought the poison simply hadn't killed her. We traveled a few kilometers while my wife offered the girl a candy that we had bought minutes before in the store. Meanwhile, I was looking on the GPS for a nearby police station so I could go directly there. When we arrived at the police station, the girl cried again and begged us to let her stay with us. My wife explained to her that nothing would happen to her, that we would help her. Finally, the girl agreed to get out of the car and give her statement, just as we had to give it. The sheriff, as we told him the story, changed his expression little by little, going from disbelief to a disturbing seriousness. After a few hours, we finished with our statements. They asked us for our IDs and the sheriff told us we could leave, but to keep an eye out in case they needed to contact us. My wife didn't want to leave her alone until she knew what would happen to her. I convinced her that we should go home to rest, and that the next day we would call by phone to see how the girl was doing, and if necessary we would return. We didn't sleep all night. The next day when we woke up, we received a call on our cell phone with terrifying news. It was the sheriff. He told us that the girl was fine despite everything, but that they had inspected the house and indeed found the lifeless body of an old woman. According to forensic experts, she had been dead for more than 3 days due to her state of decomposition. I hung up the phone immediately, trying to process what I had just heard. I needed to sit down for a moment because my legs were weak and I didn't know what to think. My wife started screaming, and a few minutes later we decided to go to the police station again. The trip was long, with an eerie silence that was only broken by the sound of the car engine. Upon arriving at the police station, the sheriff greeted us with a worried expression on his face. He took us to his office and asked us to retell what happened, showing us a photo of the old woman who was found dead. And sure enough, it was her. The same woman we saw chasing the girl the night before. We went blank. Although the agents did not believe it was the same woman we had seen, we had no doubts. If you have enjoyed this story, we invite you to subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any others. Until next time.